Welcome to Made for the Moment, describing the world through unique topics of interest. And now your host, Jason Dodier and Jaret Grossman.
It's a privilege to have you here with us. And today we're going to be talking, Jaret. My name's Jason Dodier, obviously, for those of you who have not had the privilege of being introduced to me yet. And I'm here with Jaret Grossman. And we're going to talk a bit about business and entrepreneurship. So as you heard earlier, obviously, Jaret makes some very candid, good points about toughness and what it takes to make a business from scratch. So that's precisely what we're gonna talk about and try to delve into and get some keen insight. So I guess where I'd like to start here is, Jaret, because you've done this and you've been doing it since the very early days in your dorm room, what do you need to do to create a business from scratch?
Yeah, great question, Jason. And obviously it's great to be doing this with you. In terms of being able to start a business from scratch, it's going to take obviously a great idea and a concept that you're going to be innovative with, where you're trying to build a better mousetrap, essentially. And that comes first in terms of the development of the product and making sure the delivery of it is going to be fulfilled and so forth. And then it's about how do you get people into the door, marketing and all that kind of stuff. So you're probably building it from scratch because you have a great idea, or maybe somebody else has a great idea and you're developing something that sort of piggybacks off that or replicates it. So the way to break through is you obviously have to create a roadmap for yourself, and you're probably piggybacking off of other successful businesses. But eventually it's going to have your own flair, and it's going to have your own unique footprint on it, or thumbprint. And with that being said, there's really some elements that you got to key in on. So there's marketing. There's getting people into the door and awareness. And then there's the innovative concept. And then there's this customer support. And you got to sort of map this all out before you build it. And then it's about taking action and creating all these things. So, there's a beauty with the online internet, with so many websites that are out there to help you get your start, whether it's building a website yourself, whether it's being able to create content like we're doing right now to suck people in or draw people in. But you got to have some kind of talent in a way of being able to lure people into that. So it really just takes a toughness, though, at the end of the day, because you're going to get hit in the mouth many, many times, especially if you're starting from scratch without, an exorbitant amount of resources or float or cash to be able to absorb those blows. So it really is like sorcery in a way. Being able to navigate without many resources. And that comes down to your toughness.
You hit on a good point. It's not, I like how you said sorcery, but you also have to have a vision. You have limited resources and be laser focused. Can you tell us a bit, tell the audience a bit about, business plans, right? So and I'll talk about this a little bit later when we look at it from a corporate lens, innovation, entrepreneurship. But how important is having a good plan in place? And especially, again, when you're limited, you might not have as many folks day to day, the vision, when you go to build a plan, what's been your step-to-step process as you kind of put, you look to that approach and then build something and then execute off of it? How vital has that been to your success?
Yeah. So planning is obviously, pretty important in terms of the big pillars. The micro pillars are going to drastically change in terms of the planning that you do, because every day you're getting new information. So if you're going off of 90-day-old information, it's probably going to be pretty obsolete at that point with the rate at which technology and innovation is moving. I mean, in 90 days, you could have an innovative product and somebody else, you first find out that you're competing with somebody else that's new, that's in this space. So you got to be really flexible and nimble as an entrepreneur. And that sort of changes on a daily basis, but you have to have the big pillars sort of, mapped out. And if you're innovating, then, it's some revolutionary concept, it's sort of trying to break through, then you're going to have to, forge that roadmap in a way, knowing that you're trying to change people's livelihoods and their way of thinking, and the way that most people are habitual. So they're ingrained in a certain routine or a certain concept that they're doing right now. And so you're trying to get them to change. That's not an easy process. So innovation is usually not the quickest way to success. Usually you find a trend that's already taking place if you want, quick money, so to speak, and then you build it off of that trend and you ride the wave. And that's not going to last long. But if you really are in this for a long-term game and there's some purity in what you're doing, there's purpose, then it's just, recognizing that it's going to be a long-term mission of yours. It's going to be years and years. And in order to make sure that your idea is viable, you're going to want to test it out with, other people. Maybe that's a sample size of 25 or 100 people or so forth, who you really get factor from lots of people and feedback. Now you know that you sort of hit on something, and of course there's times that, come into your life where you're going to have to stick to your guns and your purpose despite the noise around you, where other people sort of are naysayers in a way. But at the end of the day, you usually can find, several people within your circle or your group who are sort of on the same path mission as you in a lot of ways. And you sort of want to just piggyback off of them for ideas. And then, like you said, in terms of the planning of the intricacies of it, you really just need to, understand those core concepts, which is, okay, how are you going to create this product if you first have an idea? How are you going to deliver it and fulfill it? How are you going to get people to be aware of it? And if you don't have a lot of capital to be able to do that, well, what's your marketing strategy? So, it's not just enough to have a great idea and a great product. There's so many great businesses and great ideas that you've never heard about, and therefore they go out of business. So, it's really just, and all business really comes down to that concept is how do you get awareness? And then how do you create the product so that it's innovative enough where people, really take action? But the way to get them to take action is it can't just be a little bit better. It has to be so much better where they're really willing to jump ship. Like if you are creating an insurance company and you just expect, people to switch over because you're a little better on price, it's usually a burden for people to be able to do that. So, there has to be X factors around your business, and that needs to really be mapped out and planned. And then executing is the other big topic.
Well, they say, Jaret, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. You've talked a little bit about the different levels of diligence, how you have to overcome naysayers, right? To really stick to your vision, but also be compelling in a manner that gets people over the hurdle to want to change and not have a hindrance in their day-to-day life, or not impact them or take away from the limited time that we have every day. So I guess as a follow-on to that, how do you, two things, right? How do you mix innovation with a level of familiarity that people have that make them feel comfortable to make the switch? And then ultimately, when you talk about succeeding in an entrepreneurial world today, what are some of the early milestones that you consider that showcase that you are on your way? You are, in fact, getting closer to achieving certain milestones that will lead to a specific end result, ultimately maximize the probability that you're going to have success.
Yeah, so those are, amazing points. So in terms of the first one where you're talking about sort of breaking through that innovative barrier and getting people to switch from their familiarity, it's a trek, it's not going to be easy. And the bigger, goals that you have, if you're really trying to enter a space where there's huge corporations that are involved, you have to know very well going into it that you're facing pretty big heavy hitters, some who are doing good tactics and some who are doing sort of manipulative tactics to suck people in. And you got to be sort of prepared for that. So, the recommendation is really what are your goals for life? And are you looking to make sort of short-term money? Do you have some simpler goals which younger people sort of should have. And then if you have really, really big goals, larger goals, just know that if you're doing it the right way, it's going to take much, much more time to be able to do that. And that means, content is king in today's day and age, but it has to be really good, captivating content. And you're fighting a battle that, there's not so many people who are playing by the same rules. Okay. So, you're going up against some pretty heavy content that's out there with, multi-million, decamillion, billion-dollar budgets, where they might not be doing, righteous things that you believe in, for instance. And so how do you cut through all that noise? It's not an easy thing. To be sort of compelling, what gets the most views? It's girls taking their shirts off or whatever it is, right? So if you don't want to stick to that kind of, stooping to that level, so to speak, well, you just need to be more creative, and you want to put out some stuff that sort of gets people's attention and gets through the noise. And then, in terms of your second point, I believe, which is how do you know if you're sort of staying on the right path? You have to go by a lot of instinct. That's sort of how I've, gone about things, is just knowing what's right in my gut and my heart kind of thing, and mind. When I see things and people swaying to something I don't believe in, I'm going to try to stand by what I believe is truth as much as possible. And you'll have people around you, if you have good people in your circle, who sort of keep telling you to keep going and nudge you in the right direction, even if the world is not necessarily rewarding you for it, because that can't be the sole metric of why you do what you do. It can't just be, is my bank account going up or down? Because you're going to float. You're going to constantly be controlled by different things that are happening around you, and you might give up on things that were really good opportunities, but you didn't give it enough time. So you got to sort of have a real purpose behind what you're doing. Yeah, I don't know if I answered everything that you threw in.
You did. And we just fact checked you in the studio. That was World Series Game 5, where the girls took their shirts off. And I don't recall if it was to do branding, right? But people will resort to very interesting tactics today to try to get eyeballs, to try to get market share. And there's a big mix. You want to be righteous. You want to follow a certain path, and you really want to stand for something that you believe in, something wholeheartedly within your community. It's very, very important that you don't compromise yourself today, because of social media and how quickly things can go viral. It will stay with you forever. So really powerful points on it. And I guess kind of coming full circle on this, today we get a lot of questions from listeners and others who have written in talking about, all right, well, this is great. This is a roadmap. These are some of the things you can do to be successful. But what are the top areas, if you look holistically out globally and then inward back to the United States? What are the core areas, even top 5 that you're seeing where somebody should, if they're looking to start a business, to really focus on and enter into, right? What are you seeing in terms of those trends today?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of technology that's coming out that you sort of want to get in the forefront of. But again, are you in this for? It really comes back to your goal. If you're in this, as a 1 year, 2 year snapshot, you have some, immediate goals, like you got to get out of, debt, or you got to, you want to purchase a house, or you're getting, you want to get married, you got to purchase an engagement ring. So, thinking about, VR and AR and data mining and all that kind of stuff, data labeling, that's probably not going to be the avenue for you. You probably want to do some more short-term stuff that isn't going to be that long of a trek. But if you're in this for sort of a long-term game, and you're thinking 10, 15, 20 years, that's where the future is going to come into play in a huge way in terms of technology that you probably want to be on the forefront of. So if you think of what the next step is, everything is moving closer to the body. So, a computer, then you got the phone. So that now you carry the phone wherever you are. Soon technology is going to be one with the body. So if you start, thinking ahead like that and saying, okay, what's that next, innovative thing that I can come up with, for instance, that, where thoughts, are going to actually be controlled to do activity, which they're working on. But again, a lot of those stuff are handled by huge corporations in a way. So, if you don't have the resources to sort of compete with them or talent to be able to captivate an audience to pull people in, then you should sort of, really weigh your options there. But that's sort of where the future is heading. And a lot of this technology sort of exists. It's just not released to the public. You don't want to be caught with the blinders on, so to speak.
It's a good segue, Jaret, I think, what you just talked about into corporations and competitive advantage. And the marketplace we are in today is a really unique spot, right? Unemployment's low. People, young folks especially, are very highly educated. They have a lot of opportunities. And there's a lot of opportunities for young people today to not finish college and just get seed money and immediately start to build a business, which is very exciting and encouraging, right? And it fits into the ecosystem of this country and many others. And if you look at some of the biggest disruptors today, think Tesla, Slack, Spotify, Square, financial services, technology, doesn't matter the space, right? They might have different lines of business, but they've got one thing in common. They're typically run by very entrepreneurial folks, and they typically have very strong innovation practices, right? These don't have a lot of conservatism in their day-to-day practice, nor is it very much a legacy business systems in place. What would your recommendation be? And I'd be happy to provide some of my insight, having been very heavily engaged in the corporate space. But what are some of your recommendations as an entrepreneur who has had a lens into working and coaching many of these executives? How can they now take some of the best practices you've talked about and seamlessly integrate them into their established companies today to meet both rapid change and the shift into digital, globalization, and expectations and behaviors of their consumers?
Yeah, so I think you're going to be, better appointed, better suited to be able to answer that known question, with given your experience in, the corporate, landscape and working for a tremendous corporation who's doing amazing things. So I just know, as an entrepreneur who has pretty big goals and whatnot, if you have those, that it really comes down to a lot of the tactics that you're disseminating down that pyramid in the corporation of, what kind of culture are you setting with the individuals to help them maximize, their talents, because it's just really understanding everybody's sort of purpose. And, a lot of it, great corporations from the top down, you have to micromanage that talent, so to speak, and really find out a lot about what makes people tick and, how do you squeeze, that orange, so as much as possible from each of those individuals. But I'd love to hear your sort of insight.
No, it's look, my first insight is, when people look, and I've been associated with the same company for over a decade now that's heavily involved in the energy space, energy management, shift to renewables, digitization, access to energy, right? I believe that all humans, all mankind should have easy, seamless access to energy, right? Potable, good drinking water, and obviously resilience of our electrical grid, both here and around the world. So these are core areas that are important to me. And I think, companies that specialize in different verticals, they need to make it, they need to have a very clear and concise value proposition. They need to be very active in the community. And whether that means looking at, sustainability, big picture, right? Creating an environment that you can come in and win and have successes, diversity and inclusion. Companies that are doing these things and appealing to the broad mindset, but in particular, the next generation of workers are the ones that are going to transcend and grow. But one of the messages, I can't make this any clearer, is you have to also, while companies have to find a middle ground and do a good job of promoting and engaging their workforce and young people in particular also have to challenge organizations. Opportunities are there, but you have to go for it. You have to be a little bit aggressive, but you also have to do your time. Just like in entrepreneurship, right? Your first company, you were starting out, it took you years to build the traction, to get the eyeballs, and to ultimately achieve your end objective. It's the same in the corporate environment. You can't expect to get an incredible opportunity, exactly the one that you want from day one. You have to earn that. And many corporations, have the ecosystem in place to do just that. But you have to be willing to take risk, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, raise your hand for unique opportunities, right? And ultimately, you will achieve your objective if you have the patience, persistence, and willingness to take on unique and difficult challenges. That's what I've been able to see, and that's why my career has spanned many different countries and intriguing assignments and the unique kind of innovative joint venture environment that I'm part of today. And I'm really I've been blessed and lucky to have that opportunity.
That was brilliant. I love it. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, as you know, in terms of a corporation, when you're dealing with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of employees. There's so many moving parts, and sometimes you wonder how the heck is all this operating at such a high level and working. So there's so much to be able to take into account. It has to be your every waking hour, every breath, so to speak. And that really comes down to is this your purpose, or is this some ego-driven thing and that you just can't let go of or detach from? And so I think if it's that former, where it's really your purpose, and you're going to find a way to be able to do all this stuff. So, and it's just going to click, and everything's going to sort of align and make sense. So, and then if you're fighting to do it, well, then you're going to have to make some pretty dark decisions you probably wouldn't have to want to make, so to speak. So, yeah, what would you say, Jason, in terms of how somebody can level up within that corporation? You said that it takes years to be able to make some headway, so to speak, just like entrepreneurship. So what are some tips that you could give some people to be able to do that faster?
There's a couple tips that I highly recommend, and I've used myself, and I've seen many of my colleagues and similar in different industries leverage in big corporations. First, you have to look at the toolkit you have in front of you, right? As you know, a lot of these companies are, whether they're S&P 500 or they're publicly traded in their respective countries, or just a large private enterprise, you typically have access to quite a toolkit and a lot of resources. And resources meaning social media, right? The opportunity to do blogging, to do interviews, to be shared throughout those channels, right? So that's one area. You have access. So, and you want to be involved. From day one, you should be looking, how can I build a personal brand? How can I leverage what my company, the great work my company is already doing over decades of building this up, building communal involvement and engagement? What can you do there, right? Where are the platforms that already exist? And who within your company can you maybe work with on an assignment? Can you co-blog with? Can you do a co-podcast or a video session with them, right? Those are the first places to look. And that's a great way to build your connections internally and to elevate yourself as well. If you reach out and say, hey, the work you're doing is passionate. I admire it. I want to take part in it. How can I do that? That's the first thing. After that, you want to look at, the foundation. What is your company doing in the community? So one of the things that's exciting, I think, for our generation and others is, you want to latch on to companies that have a big communal presence. And again, they have the resources. They've already have a track record of getting engaged. So one of the things we do is we provide an access to energy program where we go out, we educate folks all over the world on energy management programs. We donate different resources, whether that be products that we develop, human capital. You get a chance to go out there and really walk the talk, right? There's one thing to talk about something, but a lot of times these companies, big businesses, give you the opportunity to go out and start to actually execute on your vision, execute on your ideas, your beliefs, and do it in real time. That's an incredible opportunity. So you got to go in and understand what the mission is. Look at the core metrics that the company and the business have. A lot of them have social barometers. They'll have ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards and frameworks, or other things that they have to put in place in order to achieve certain financial metrics. And insert yourself into some of those things. Leverage the toolkit. Leverage the vast community of people from across the age spectrum that have a lot of experience and expertise, and start to have an impact. Start to learn. Start to make yourself better so that you can leave a lasting impact on the world. And then the third area is use this framework, use the innovation, right? Some of these companies have venture funds and arms. to start to mentor and get involved in other, whether it be nonprofits, in other startups. One of the beautiful things about these companies is you have the capital, you have the ability to do proof of concept, you have the ability to help amazing entrepreneurs like yourself, Jaret, to build their brand, to test their proof of concepts, and to grow and have do some great good in the community. And that's one of the things I've admired both close up and from afar, having been involved in this kind of an ecosystem for a long period of time. And some of the things I encourage when I'm going out and speaking to recent college graduates or speaking with young folks within my company and other like-minded companies and industry thought leaders. So those would be some of the top recommendations I would provide as you look both inherently, intrinsically, and then from an outward perspective going into your career journey. So Jaret, in continuation of some of the stuff we've been talking about during this episode around entrepreneurship, corporate America, what are some of the major problems in corporations today, and why innovation might seem slow in many of these businesses? We're really pleased to announce that we've got Ross Pollack in the studio today. He's the Chief Human Resources Officer for Lionsgate, and essentially Ross oversees all aspects of human resources and administration for their global operations, but also for its joint ventures. He and his team lead the expanded company's employee diversity initiatives and have helped revamp rewards programs and launch a series of successful health and wellness offerings. On top of sponsoring core initiatives, Ross was also a key member and part of the core team responsible for the successful acquisition and integration of Stars in December 2016. Additionally, important for our audience members who've expressed strong interest in looking globally as well, prior to joining Lionsgate in 2014, Ross was actually leading human resources, licensing, and operations across the entertainment industry, but based in Hong Kong, where he focused from 2009 to 2012 to help turn around Hong Kong-based Celestial Pictures Limited as its CEO, restructuring the company's operations and ultimately expanding the content distribution network, achieving profitability. And it was one of numerous strategic merger orchestrations. And again, prior to that, spent 13 years with Sony Pictures Entertainment as a human resources and licensing executive, 6 of those years in Hong Kong.
Thanks for tuning in to Made for the Moment, with conversations and unique guests surrounding business, news, politics, wellness, and entertainment. And now a word from our special guest.
Ross, thanks for being on the show. Really, really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So to kick off, I think as part of this discussion and topic we've been having, how do you see from your position and doing this for quite some time, the role of HR leader evolving? And what are some of the tools, procedures, and things you're leveraging at Lionsgate that might counter some of the things we see with matrix organizations, restructuring, and ultimately prioritizing key initiatives?
Sure. Corporate HR departments have evolved over the last several decades, where initially they were really administrative agents, and so their responsibility was to provide benefits, make sure people got paid, and the like. And over the last decade or so, there's been a real acceleration toward those departments becoming true business partners that then focus on strategic consultation, succession planning, things like human capital allocation, and quite recently and very importantly, data-driven decision making. So the CHROs that are now leading these organizations with this data-driven decision-making and human capital allocation, they're critical members of the corporate leadership team, particularly in the Fortune, let's say, 500 organizations. And so they're partnering with different areas of their organization to attract, to develop, and to maintain a supply or a stream of diverse and inclusive talent, to identify, the best talent, and to keep, the corporate board of directors and senior management apprised of, really, just like other parts of the business, what is the return on investment of bringing that talent on board, investing in things like training and development, but looking at it from a quantitative perspective rather than historically at a qualitative perspective. And so as the role of the CHRO has evolved, so is their toolkit, which again, as I sort of mentioned just recently, which includes the state-of-the-art analytics. So this focus on data analytics, which is used to recruit, train, and evaluate employees. Things like what used to be very common, the annual performance review, where supervisor and employees sit down once a year to have a conversation on performance, have kind of gone the way of the dinosaur. And what many companies are doing, or are doing what we here at Lionsgate call performance conversations, where the employee and the supervisor actually sit down 3 or 4 times a year for shorter periods of time, but set goals, review those goals. If something has changed in the job or the position, to change those goals in midstream, and then at the end of the year to evaluate it. But it's a much more frequent interaction between supervisors and employees. And here at Lionsgate, we think that's kind of driven a much more performance-oriented and performance-driven culture. And another example is, the employee surveys, which used to be these 70-question surveys that employees, probably 20 or 30% of employees fill out in any larger company. I mean, we've moved to a much more nimble, much more agile model where employee surveys are 10 to 15 questions or even shorter. And we used, these surveys can be completed on smartphones or on iPads or on computers, and they can be customized for each business unit, getting data which we can analyze a lot faster and pass that on to the business to be able to use to make decisions. So speed to market, so to speak, speed to change is much more important now, and we're getting participation levels of 70 to 80%, which obviously is much more meaningful and quite high, compared to what other companies would historically get with these once-a-year annual surveys.
So Ross, you brought up some key points there. You talk about the new toolkit, state-of-the-art analytics, things that as the CHRO role evolves, and putting down mandates within a business to make more efficient use of employees' time, enhanced training opportunities, and of course, again, using data-driven opportunities to look at return on investment. When you look at Lionsgate and then the broader industry, what other key areas you're seeing, particularly as it relates to media, to enhance this environment of innovation? And then when your employees are having these meetings, are they shifting their objectives based on these meetings? I mean, typically when you see a corporate structure, you get a list of quantitative with a few qualitative metrics, and they tend to stay in place for the remainder of that year. I really am intrigued by this approach. How often do you see those metrics potentially evolving based on these subsequent meetings employees are having with the managers?
Well, yeah, let me answer that in order. I think you have 2 questions there.
Yeah.
The first one on innovation, that's a big buzzword here. It's in fact one of our values as an organization. Embracing change, thinking outside the box, and what we like to say here, Lionsgate zigs where other companies are zagging. That's all kind of part of our structure, part of Lionsgate's DNA. So what distinguishes us from other larger companies or companies that are not as integrated and perhaps more siloed, is that employees at Lionsgate are, I'd say, empowered with greater autonomy than their peers at most of the other studios. They're encouraged to take greater risks. And I would say they're, rewarded for being bold and forward-looking. We also place a high priority on what we call Lionsgate 360, which is bringing all of our company's film, television, streaming platform, and the corporate resources to bear to look at specific opportunities and challenges. Like, for example, when we're looking at a piece of content, should we launch that as a game first? Does that make sense to have that roll out first as a feature film? Does it make sense to have it as a TV property first? Those are done collectively and within this Lionsgate 360-degree structure. Those are done in a non-siloed environment, which I think makes us quite successful from that point of view, unlike the more siloed legacy media companies. So it's a much more collaborative approach. And this kind of starts at the weekly division head meetings that we have, where, again, people are encouraged to speak up and provide an array of ideas and opportunities for the whole organization to try to take advantage of. And to your second question, absolutely, in terms of, do we tack, so to speak, using a sailing term, do we tack when, there's a change in our business, or if we're in midstream, there's changes in priorities. The ability of the executive team through this Lionsgate 360, through the level of collaboration and teamwork we have, and the flattening of the organization allows us in midstream to say, we've gone down in this direction, rather than just let momentum carry us. We need to tack, we need to make some changes. And we definitely then would go back to, at sort of a granular level, the whole relationship between the employee and the supervisor, and make sure that what's done at the senior level is reflected at the employee supervisor level in terms of changing priorities and adjusting goals in order that everyone's aligned and, we're all, as the expression goes, singing from the same song sheet.
Hey, Ross, thank you so much for these, in-depth answers. I mean, it's incredible to get behind the scenes look at what's going on at Lionsgate. And for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, you guys have done some of the biggest movies, for decades now. I mean, Hunger Games, La La Land, Judy, Rambo series, John Wick. I could go on and on. I mean, Lincoln Lawyer is probably my personal favorite, But, Ross, when you have obviously a very unique system that you shared with us today. And when it comes to hiring specifically, the best business person or CEO is not necessarily the one that gets the best grades in school, or the actor or actress is not always the one that you could spot from a young age that they really killed it on Broadway. So when it comes to cultivating a method that finds top talent within the corporate structure, how do you go about doing that? Is there some kind of method that you've developed over the years to find that it factor?
Sure. I want to be very straightforward and clear that as CHRO, as head of human resources within a studio environment, we're not hiring the producers, directors, or creative talents externally. I can speak to it, from a distance, but it's not us. It's not the HR function within Lionsgate doing that. But as a child, so to speak, of the digital age, and the first major Hollywood studio, I guess, in several decades, Lionsgate prides itself on being agile, digitally fluent, and proficient in bringing world-class talent and iconic properties, some of the movies that you mentioned, to every kind of screen, whether that's a movie screen, a TV screen, streaming platforms, desktop and mobile. And so the focus of the organization is really on being bold and looking at original programming that's a little different. It's what I said before about zigging where everyone else is zagging. And so whether it's movies like John Wick, or some of them you mentioned, Knives Out, La La Land, or TV series, and we have an outstanding TV group that's produced such hits as Orange is the New Black, Mad Men, Dear White People, or even this, the buzzy new series, which is on NBC called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. We look for opportunities and for partnerships where, not only is it going to be profitable, but we're bringing interesting, exciting, diverse, new content to the screen where we're not directly competing with some of the larger studios, but we're finding our place where we can, again, be profitable, tell great stories, and also, look out for the bottom line and for our shareholders. That's kind of on the content side. On the organization side, I guess it's, how we do it or what we look for is really akin to, analogous, to, baseball team. And so we look for multi-position players. So we want a player that can play the entire infield or a player that can play the entire outfield. And so, to exemplify this Lionsgate 360 in action, we definitely have specialists in the organization, but really the secret sauce for Lionsgate is multi-talented executives who can wear many hats or many baseball caps, I guess, continuing the analogy. For example, one of our home entertainment marketing executives recently took on new responsibility to spearhead our state-of-the-art initiative in data analytics. What's becoming hot on the data side is what kind of data can we mine from the movies that we're making in terms of what are the audiences telling us that they want on the feature side, and what are the audiences for our Stars app or our Stars platform. What are audiences telling us that they want to watch on those platforms, and sharing that information across the organization. And so data mining, even in a Hollywood studio like ours, is becoming very important. And we're moving someone from a senior marketing role who's really smart and dynamic into this very important data role. Again, she's an outstanding multi-talented player. And so we're switching her positions to give her an opportunity to grow and to take on new skills.
Yeah, amazing. So, I definitely label that term as sort of like specialized generalist, right? People who are really good at lots of things, and you have to be, in this day and age. So, that's amazing that you guys sort of like look for that, even in such a corporate environment where you do have a lot of resources that, a lot of like in the entrepreneurial space, that's sort of a requirement. You got to be really good, but sure. It's interesting that you guys have that philosophy for sure. Yeah, and what would you say, Ross, are kind of the challenges that are really specific? Your industry is very different than lots of other people's industries that they may be in, that they're in listening on the show, for instance. In the media entertainment industry, what specific challenges do you face that are really unique to you, especially when it comes to finding top talent and so forth?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I agree with what you said. There are some definitely unique challenges in entertainment and media. It's LA is the the home of Hollywood, and a lot of media and entertainment companies reside here. It becomes somewhat of a bit of an inclusive type of environment. Having said that, we also share challenges with other organizations that are not unique, which is creating a diverse and inclusive workplace, having a performance culture, the best allocation of people resources. That's kind of common thread across all of human resources, whether you're in an entertainment company or working in a bank in Chicago, you're going to have those challenges. But just to think of a couple of areas where we're kind of unique, I think the first one is, related to our content, which is, telling relatable stories to a diverse global audience. So whether that's in the multi-billion-dollar-a-year film and television business or our Spanish language streaming platform Pantalla, their recently launched company in India. We're always looking for fresh, creative voices who can connect with an ever more diverse and fragmented global audience. And not only do we need to redouble our commitment to diversity and inclusiveness, but we also need to hire the kind of diverse and inclusive voices and workforce who can engage and identify this talent. The second one is, again, which is unique to our business, but you as a consumer would be very much aware of it, is that the legacy bundle is breaking down, and cord cutting is transforming our business. Everyone is going over the top right now. Clearly with Disney Plus and some of the other platforms out there, HBO Max, and ourselves with Stars, everyone's going over the top directly to consumers. They're creating new buyers for premium scripted television content and new competitors for our theatrical film business. But it's also creating new opportunities for like our Stars Play international streaming platform as it launches around the world. So what this means is it means recruiting a new generation of digitally conversant, consumer-oriented executives who could keep the business at the cutting edge of a changing world. So again, to recap, creating diverse, exciting global content, and finding people that can do that, that relate to that content is critical. And, the whole digital transformation and the entire movement from scheduled television and even from, cable platforms to content on demand, over-the-top content, subscription video on demand, it takes a new skill set, and it takes, identifying people, hiring people that are digital natives that understand how to operate in that environment and be successful in that environment. I would say that's unique to media and entertainment.
And Ross, when you talk about some of the unique challenges, the inclusive type of environment that you might be operating in, when you look at folks that are out potentially exemplify Lionsgate 360, the vision, they're agile, they're digitally fluent, right? They have the potential to bring incredible talent to the organization. And as you stated earlier, I like this term, they can tack relatively quickly to change an industry or priorities or a career transition. So if you look at people that might be in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, they might be working in different places and either they're mid-career or never broken into entertainment. What's your suggestion to some of our, to our listeners who are here today that want to get into entertainment companies or want to work at Lionsgate or a similar business? What are some of the processes to go about doing that?
Yeah, well, there's interesting. I was actually on a call early today with someone who's got a real estate background and looking to get into the entertainment industry and wanted just to give up fully the real estate background. And what he didn't realize, this person, is that there are a number of large companies that large companies like Disney and Universal that actually probably could use somebody with a real estate background because they're managing vast theme parks. And Lionsgate, through our location-based entertainment group, licenses our content all across the world in theme parks and shopping malls and destination centers. So my point here is that most people think that Hollywood means in front of the camera and behind the camera. And that, I would say, is a critical part, obviously. But in terms of the number of people versus the entire Hollywood population, it's actually a very small portion of the jobs. And there's hundreds of equally exciting opportunities in finance and legal, business development and marketing and sales. I would even say human resources. And candidates with skills in those areas outside the field of entertainment can often make the leap into a career at a media studio. So that's sort of the first way is not to think of Hollywood as merely producing movies, being an actor and actress, writing a script, but the vast number of jobs and all of the studios and all the media companies on their corporate websites advertise those jobs. And if you open that up, you'll see that most of those are jobs like accountants or finance or new business development or strategic planning or tax. So there's tremendous opportunities there. I think the second way is certainly those that want to start directly out of college or out of university. Most candidates start in assistant roles and they work their way up, taking advantage, particularly at Lionsgate, which is what amounts to a 1 or 2 year apprenticeship that allows smart, hardworking employees the opportunity to learn about the different parts of the organization and see what their interests are and where their skill matches the job needs. And then, essentially to network and find opportunities throughout the organization. We have many examples, including my own assistants who have moved into everything from the television group and into the motion picture group, and some have stayed within HR. So we provide mentorship opportunities for them to learn from more experienced to learn from more experienced employees about what it takes to be successful. So entering in as a assistant is another way of joining the organization. It's a bit of an apprenticeship type of situation, but it also gives you visibility across the whole organization so you can figure out where exactly you'd like to join. So one is for more experienced people with specific skill sets to look at entertainment as not just being in front of behind the camera, and those that are just coming out of school to maybe consider starting off in a assistant type of role where they're essentially apprenticeship and can learn the business from the bottom up.
And Ross, just finishing up that topic, and as we go into the last major subject of our discussion today, the consolidation that's happening with Disney, 21st Century Fox, AT&T, Time Warner, Viacom, and CBS. Do you see a similar trajectory as it relates to future job opportunities? You talked about digital. You talked about leveraging core areas, whether that's tax, real estate, legal. Many businesses have these key staples to keep themselves operationally savvy. But what else do you see when it comes to hiring and future roles, especially in this very intensive job hiring market that we're in right now?
Well, there is consolidation, and of course that obviously can be very concerning. But there's also, with the growth of these OTT or over the top or subscription video on demand services, comes along with what amounts to an insatiable appetite for content. And so we're in the golden age of content, and our television group is got 18 shows that are in production and doing extraordinarily well. There's just this huge demand for content, which is why companies are looking at merging. Why, in essence, Disney decided that they wanted to buy Fox was for the Fox library before Disney launched Disney Plus, their subscription video on demand, their OTT service. So the consolidation does reduce the number of jobs overall, but also creates other opportunities in the digital arena. So with Disney, focusing on Disney, with new digital jobs in Disney Plus, and also for content creators, whether it's in long form or short form content, whether it's in feature content and television content, to feed this need for large amounts of content. So it's a plus minus type of situation in terms of the impact of consolidation in our industry.
And thank you for that, Ross. And just kind of, I guess, to kind of close out here and really come back to the true heart of the discussion today. When you look at Lionsgate, you look at where things are going in the industry. You gave some great examples about what Lionsgate is doing today in terms of being able to compete, to continue to add value, to really stay front of mind for consumers and users. With you got 18 shows in production. You have the Starz streaming platform. So when you look at brands and disruptors like Netflix, Amazon, Apple impacting entertainment and recruiting key talent, what ultimately will continue to make Lionsgate attractive outside of, again, the content and some of the streaming platforms, but what else do you see that maybe the people listening in don't know about or can't find as easily when searching for Lionsgate across social mediums?
Well, it's the zigging versus zagging that I mentioned before. It's finding opportunities rather than saying we're going to follow the lead of the other studios and create content which competes with that. If you've got a great idea and a great story to tell, there's nothing wrong with that. But certainly finding your place in the media ecosystem is really critical. We think that we've got a unique, not easily replicable portfolio of assets across our organization. We tend to, as a smaller studio, do more with less to punch above our weight. We're not looking to compete in an arms race of spending, but we're focusing, I would say, instead of doing what's worked for us over the last 20 years of our history, we generate actually the highest revenue per employee of any studio in the industry. So we're very proud of that. But we do that by prioritizing our skills: agility, speed to market, clarity of focus, entrepreneurial culture, which we've talked about, great IP, and world-class talent relationships. Many, on the talent relationships, one of the things that we're focused on is making this a great place to work for talent. We want to be home for talent, and we want them to feel that, we're going to listen to their ideas, we're going to partner with them, and this is going to be a great relationship for them and for us. And I think, that makes us uniquely a great place to work. We're always on the lookout for creative talent and motivated individuals who can flourish in the kind of entrepreneurial environment that Lionsgate has been over the last 20 years and made us successful. So being a focused studio that knows what we're about and having a strategic plan and executing that tactically, I think has made us successful. We've got very strong management without a lot of management turnover. We have very stable management. And so they've been guiding the ship, so to speak, for many years. And, entertainment industry, like any other industry, has its up and down, moments, and it's not easy. But, with this vision that we have and knowing our place and what kind of content we want to produce that's going to be different than everyone else and create profit for us, for our employees and our shareholders, we think that's going to long-term be the secret sauce that continues to make Lionsgate successful in the future.
That's incredible, by the way. Highest revenue of any employee per employee in the industry. What a statistic that is to say. So, Ross, thanks again on behalf of Jaret, myself, our entire community. Thank you sincerely for being part of our inaugural episode. Truly grateful. This is very unique perspective and valuable insights. And we hope to have you back on the show at some point in the near future.
It would be my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, incredible. And, how did you know that, Schneider was the company that you wanted to end up with, and what makes you sort of stay with them? Is there any kind of secret recipe that's going on there that just makes you feel like this is the place that you belong and that you want to be in?
Yeah, so for all the reasons I just mentioned, it was a company that has a global presence. Schneider gives an incredible opportunity, like many businesses, to work on a day-to-day basis with folks from every walk of life, all different backgrounds, right? To give you the opportunity to live pretty much anywhere you want to live. Myself personally, I spent a good amount of my 20s living in the Middle East, working throughout Middle East and Africa, and a good chunk of time living in Europe and traveling throughout the world in a variety of global roles. And it's perspective. Schneider was able, and I knew this from day one, was able to give me that real-time perspective to develop my own way of thinking, to become an independent leader in this space, really understand what I wanted to do and from a maturity standpoint. But I knew it was as a company that had the access to resources to be able to help me grow personally and professionally, but also to build this global network to truly do good. And, I can see after all this time, the fruits of all that labor is starting to come full circle in some of the work that we're doing, both here in the United States and abroad. And, I followed the company closely. And I think it's important for, students that are now thinking about what they're going to do outside of college and all the way around, whether that's entrepreneurs that are potentially going to be acquired by some of these big companies or individuals that are looking to potentially change careers or look at other companies. It really starts with leadership, right? And I was always very impressed with some of the leadership at Schneider. I watched them as I was young, and I continue to watch them over the years, and they've never deviated from that core message in terms of what their perspective has been and what they've been trying to do. And they continue to put things forward, and they continue to make these announcements publicly to really have that impact in the community. They don't shy away from tough questions and making hard, bold decisions. And that's another thing I think as a young person, when you're making these decisions on what you want to do, you have to look at the top, the tone at the top. What are they setting? And I saw that in early days when I was doing internships and starting to get involved in this community. So you have to consider these things, Jaret. If you don't consider all that, I mean, you could take risk early on, but you mitigate that level of risk. So get yourself out there, talk to people. It's amazing, right? And you hit on this earlier, and you've hit on it in a lot of your podcasts. But it's amazing what you can get out of folks by just requesting some time to have a discussion. People that are passionate about things. Doesn't matter if they're C-suite or not. They're going to take the time to sit down and talk with you and have a conversation and try to get you on board.
Do you find that they're like really receptive, people in your company, but also, in other companies and so forth? Or is it that people sort of have their guard up and they don't necessarily want mentees because it's, taking up some time? And are they just, focused on the internal in terms of taking care of their own, or somebody from the outside, being a mentor-mentee relationship? Is that something that, you find people are receptive to?
I've found that the most successful companies and the most successful leaders are also the best mentors. And by the way, one thing that I found is incredible, and I've leveraged this in my career, is reverse mentoring. As you've mentioned, when I asked you that question about trends and some of the key things, whether it's AI, augmented reality, energy, sustainability, across the board, social media, big data, young folks have a lot of access, right? They're coming out of school. They have a great educational pedigree. They're learning some of the latest and greatest technology. So one of the things great leaders do is they mentor, but they also, in return, look for reverse mentoring to learn they'll ask candid questions, and you build that trusting relationship, which helps them define their business plan and their strategy. So one of the reasons some of these very successful leaders, from Bob Iger to Steven Schwartzman to our CEO, Jean-Pascal Dutoit, are so successful is that they take the time to mentor and get reverse mentoring in return. And that's extremely exciting. I mean, for young folks. And that's one of the reasons I try to take time out of my schedule every week to be a mentor and also to be a mentee. And I think it should be in the lifeblood, the cornerstone of a business.
That's sort of the culture that, somebody, let's say when they're either looking for a company or they're looking to jump ship because they're really just not happy. Is that sort of the culture that they should really just look for? Do you think that's the best way to, that they're going to be happy, find fulfillment, but also be able to climb that corporate ladder and find that success that they want?
I believe so. I believe.
Or should it just be about, what that initial salary is and, the types of products that they're selling or whatever. And that's sort of, it.
I mean, Jaret, you're no stranger to this. And I've seen it, if you're doing what you love and what you believe in, you're genuinely excited every morning when you wake up, all that stuff will come, right? There's still a battle today of especially among young folks, and the alpha mentality of wanting to be the best and wanting to maximize your earnings potential, which you should look to do, especially today, right? It's a competitive environment. A lot of young people bring much, much, much more to the table than maybe they did, could have decades ago based on the level of access and things that we have today. But with that said, it's absolutely imperative that you look at the organization and you look at organizations that have really good organizational behavior in place and that have very strong HR practices. HR has gotten pushed to and we should do a whole segment on this, but HR has gotten pushed kind of to the background in many cases. And truthfully, it's so important. It's so important to have, because executives do get busy and they're not maybe touching the marketplace or getting access to young talent as much as they'd like to. They try to speak at really good, pertinent events. And provide addresses at graduation and stay present on critical campuses. But if you don't have the right organizational behavior and HR platform and leadership in place, you're going to miss out on those nuggets out there across the world and access to that information and data and talent. So I'm always looking, and I'm getting involved with our organization to try to have a say into what we're doing from an organizational behavior standpoint. How are we putting and crafting our strategy to make sure we're not missing some of these talented folks that are coming out of school or that might be on the job market. We want to hit those folks, and I think people that are looking for opportunities need to ask those questions of prospective employers from day one.
Yeah, brilliant. And, Jason, look, electric companies, energy companies sort of get a bad rap, so how do you guys sort of, combat that, counteract that, and stay sort of, on the path or whatnot?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things, Jaret, which is really, really important. And it goes back to what I said initially. The first element is, what is your level of, what's your communal engagement? What are your, when you talk about your board members, when you talk about, stockholders, right? This is very important. One of the methodologies is you can aim for carbon and carbon reduction, then you're going to hit the cash at the end of the day. So you still have to hit certain metrics. You still have to have a very strong cash flow situation to keep your business strong, to pay your SG&A and all of those things. But the first thing is, what are you doing in the community? How are you, whether it's through developing academies for, to help educate and give access to underprivileged or underdeveloped parts of the world, resource development, advisory services. What are you doing there, right? So that's first and foremost. That helps me understand and will help others understand if a company is truly righteous. How are they giving back to the community? And then in terms of a pay structure, right? Typically in big corporates, companies pay out bonuses to their employees and obviously to major executives based on hitting certain milestones. What do those milestones look like? And are they in the best interest of humanity, society, and in the energy space, carbon reduction, right? Becoming net zero. What are you doing there? In many states and countries are signing different pacts. And you're seeing a lot of companies, right? Microsoft is a recent example of taking ownership today to bring in-house renewable energy and resources and a mix of essentially enterprise-wide energy services and guidance, right? When it comes to resiliency and sustainability to achieve those end objectives. Again, it's walking the talk. And I always look at that when I'm getting engaged and having discussions with business leaders across the spectrums, and we're no different. We're no different.
It's really just not losing, the forest for the trees kind of thing, and just focusing on, hey, if the technology just isn't there, then it's not there, and I think a lot of people just, they're up in arms about, energy and sustainability, like you're talking about. But there's not, where is the innovation, So Tesla, for instance, has done some tremendous things, in terms of transforming the automobile industry. But there's some practical issues, in terms of the energy space that just have not been solved yet, at least, in the mainstream. So, I think people kind of, lose that, and sort of they pin the corporations as sort of evil or whatever it is. And I'm sure there, are not so good corporations, in your space and so forth. But what do you think is the realistic timeline of things sort of changing, where there's sustainable energy? And people often forget, before the energy that we're using right now on a daily basis, how life was like. It wasn't the greatest life that people were living, if you go back, hundreds of years ago and so forth, compared to today, in terms of what the advent of the energy that we do have right now transformed us, right? So, what do you say though, in terms of the realistic innovation that's going to take place, where we'll be able to, modify a lot of the energy that we're using and consuming right now?
No, look, we're hitting a threshold, right? Where things are really going to move. They're going to move very, very fast, right? And one of the main reasons, Jaret, is simply economics. It's just become more economically viable to leverage a lot of the new distributed energy resources we're seeing today, whether that's solar, wind, geothermal, right, and other technologies that are coming into the market. Battery technology, as we talked about earlier, one-on-one has become much more efficient and effective, and there's many incredible leaders and minds that are dedicated to bringing those opportunities to market to bear. But I think the other area of it, Jaret, that I was leaning to is there's the innovation that has to happen to encourage this, right? It's both a mixture of internal and external related stuff. It's in order to get to these goals and develop world-class products, it starts with people, right? And how are companies, both as global citizens, right, as good global corporate citizens, but what are they doing, right? What are companies today? You hear this left and right every day on the news, but what are companies doing to showcase this? That they not only are providing the best environment for employees to do their most incredible work, but how are they giving them access, right? What kind of programs do they have? What about pay equity, right? What about corporate programs, safety management, overall corporate well-being? You got to think about the foundational elements to achieve what you just asked me in your question, which is, right, as this is more economically viable, as more technology is put out there, as look at some of the biggest states, New York, California, other places in New England, PJM, when it comes to an energy perspective, like the Midwest, as ERCOT in Texas, as more mandates come out from state and local governments to achieve certain levels of energy reduction, these things they will happen. Technology is going to come out, but what you have to think about is, how do you enable your employees to come up with this stuff, right? And that's the key to it, because ultimately, clean water, right? Access to energy, the agricultural business today, right? That good, clean food and reduction of things that would necessarily harm us. You look at the things that have happened with Bayer recently and Roundup. All of these technologies that are going to have to come through the workshops and the folks and digital transformation. So that would be my answer to your question. Is really it's happening. It's full steam ahead. I've seen, and I've been fortunate enough to witness some incredible new innovative technologies that are going to tie right into this whole ecosystem to help states and governments achieve these end objectives. But ultimately, it's going to be the people that are going to get us there. So what are corporations and startups doing to enable their workforce to achieve these objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. So, where do you think that next shift is, though? I mean, they've been doing a lot of stuff with solar and wind, and not much headway has been made, so to speak, so in a lot of those aspects, some, but, in terms of practically speaking, what's economically feasible for the average individual, where do you think that next major shift is going to be?
Well, Jaret, the next major shift that, from what I see, when you look at the sustainability standpoint, is probably along the lines of resilience and cybersecurity when it comes to our grid in this country, right? So look no further than the cover of Wall Street Journal pretty much every day almost over the past couple months. Look at PG&E in California, right? Look at some of the issues that have been in other states on the West Coast and East Coast, right? So one of the benefits we've had as a country is, yes, in the early days in the 60s and 70s, we're extremely innovative. We were first of our kind when it came to electrical distribution and transmission lines. But unfortunately, a lot of that's become outdated and antiquated, right? We don't have our wires and transmissions above ground. We're not underground. A lot of other countries, while some of them are well behind, they have the advantage of being, leveraging all the newest technologies and trends and access to be able to build best in class. Look no further than Europe and Middle East, some of the airports and construction that have happened versus what we see in this country. So we have work to do. One of the top areas I think will be, and this is an area I'm very heavily involved in, is microgrids, right? These are a mixture of distributed energy solutions with a mix of like a battery storage, and it's a way to essentially island off of the grid today. So if you have if you're leveraging the grid that is, essentially run by PG&E, and you have a power outage and you're a mission critical facility like a hospital, or you're managing transportation, or you've got a business to run, you've got millions of dollars at risk and people's lives potentially at risk because you are working off an antiquated, high risk grid system. So a microgrid will allow you to island. It'll allow you to maintain your high levels of sustainability through, as we talked about, a mix of potentially solar, wind, battery storage. So it's going to check all of those boxes. But you're also going to be able to have, you'll have your digital system in place. You'll have a control system architecture, and you'll be able to fortify it with best-in-class digital cybersecurity technology to ensure that you are getting one pane of glass. You're getting truth, right? So that data you're being fed, we're leveraging the best-in-class technology to ensure that, for example, the sensory data is not being manipulated by potential issues with cybersecurity. So these things have to be considered and taken into account when you're looking at solutions today. So I think we're literally, Jaret, getting pushed where this has to happen. And the last thing I'll say as a caveat, look no further. I'm living in New York right now, right? Local law 94 and 97, commitments to being 100% carbon neutral by a certain period of time. These are going to be laws and mandates, or maximizing your roof space to be 100% solar when possible. So you got a mixture of laws and a business to run and protecting people's life safety equipment. So that's where we're going. So that's hot.
So Jason, obviously this is very difficult, and you're front and center, on the front lines of, a type of corporation that's receiving tremendous, societal pressures, global pressures, political pressures, so, I don't want to go too off topic here in terms of like climate change and, all that stuff. There's two different camps, who are very adamant about, and more than two different camps, but, people have very strong opinions on this stuff, for and against. And many people just think it's a movement as a money grab kind of thing. And there's a lot of scientists who, some are for it and many are against it, So, but in terms of a business context, how do you deal with those political pressures and then make sound business decisions where, even if you have the inner workings of the finances of the company and what technology you have and what products, are viable and so forth. And, they're coming out with laws and mandates that are making you change your entire business model, for instance. How do you sort of navigate that and know what the right thing to do is?
Look, it's tough, right? I spent the last so before my time in New York and after I was overseas, I spent the last 3 years in Washington, D.C., working in this space. A lot of exposure, a lot of detailed, in-depth discussions. But there's a couple of things, right? While the impacts of climate change, they haven't been evenly spread around the planet, and they're not going to be. But there's no denying that there's temperature increases, things are changing. The strongest warming is happening in the Arctic during cooler seasons, and we're seeing climbs, and we're seeing climate-related risks that are evident. So there's enough things to point to. At the end of the day, Jaret, I mean, it's not really a battle. You're always going to have, like you said so eloquently at the beginning. Doesn't matter what you're doing. You can have all the evidence pointing in one direction. There'll always be naysayers, and it's always going to be a battle. The thing is, when you look from a generational standpoint, when you look at the people and the leaders and the companies that are already taking the reins to move this forward, some of the key stakeholders from BlackRock to the biggest tech names across the board, you name it. We have a responsibility, and it tugs at the heartstrings too when you start to talk about how do we leave this world for future generations, right? For future generations, and just even what we breathe in today. It doesn't matter if you can showcase to folks and make a really good case for economically viable, clean energy that is easy to construct and deploy, right? And you can provide, and it can work for everybody because the big carbon producers or big oil and gas companies and others, right? There's opportunities to purchase renewable energy credits, to negotiate PPAs, power purchase agreements, right? So everybody can have a potential play here and have an opportunity to do good. And I firmly believe that it's just identifying the use case and seeing what is most palatable for the different parties, because ultimately there's a way to kind of get out there. Now, natural gas is a cleaner alternative, right? It's a cleaner alternative to some of the other methodologies, and it's going to be around a long time. And it's going to take some time to phase down. And like fuel cell technology, a lot of it today that's viable is fed from natural gas. But There's some great technologies like carbon capture that are out there, using excess steam from a combined heat and power standpoint. So using that excess steam instead of wasting it up into the environment to capture that and use it to potentially provide thermal to buildings, right, to help them hit their heating or cooling objectives. So there's many technologies and auxiliary technologies that are out in the marketplace today that can be leveraged to help achieve end goals. So I think there's no shortage, regardless of who is the leading political party. There's going to be no shortage of opportunities, because ultimately, that's the beauty of, and Jaret, that's the beauty of public-private partnership today. That's things in this country are going to get done. We're going to advance and achieve the things that we dreamed about and envisioned because of getting the private sector, getting individual states and individual think tanks involved. It's not going to be just government backed. That's how we're going to achieve our objectives. So that was my roundabout answer to your question.
So, a lot to take in there, obviously, but, I think, the universe nudges us to innovate, right? Now, in terms of a huge corporation with thousands of employees and systems already built, and you got a considerable leverage and resources and political power, contracts that have already been forged, how do you go about when new technology comes about implementing that? So if you can walk us through a little bit of that process, I think that will help sort of, a lot of people who are in the corporate environment, or they have a business of, 100 employees and they're looking to level up, or they've got, 1,500 employees or whatnot. And, they have systems that are already in place, and they're struggling with the idea of, I want to introduce a new product, or, but I have so many wrapped up systems, how do I go about doing it? So, and that's a political drawn out process in itself. There's politics within a corporation. So, what can you enlighten us a little bit on that process?
Certainly. Yeah, it's a unique process in terms of, how do you integrate new innovative technologies within a corporate structure? Corporations have a unique opportunity, right? That especially they can offer innovative companies and startups. One of the biggest things, Jaret, is proof of concepts. You have the chance, right? So when you look at a technology, first you have to make sure that it fits within your ecosystem. It fits within your core objective, the market landscape that you're working with. And that's first and foremost. So you do your due diligence and you make sure that key technology or the folks involved in that technology are going to marry up nicely with the geography, the ecosystem drivers, and help you overcome certain barriers. And obviously, in many cases, we look to innovation and we look to potentially acquisitions and POCs where we don't have the resources in R&D to do that, right? And we look to joint ventures, right? So one of the things I'm involved in my business today is a joint venture between Schneider Electric and the Carlyle Group called Struxure to design, build, operate, and finance microgrids. And part of that, which is extremely exciting, is to leverage best-in-class innovative technologies to bring those into our ecosystem to help us and our customers achieve an end objective. So that's the first thing to it, is really understanding, what space you're playing in, what you're missing, so what you don't have in-house, what you're not going to be able to achieve within your R&D roadmap, and then being very careful, leveraging your experts. A lot of companies have a venture fund, or they've got an innovation team that kind of goes out, and their day-to-day job is to mine and meet with these incredible visionary founders, right? And then you work it from there, Jaret. Then you start to do some beta testing. You have some in-depth sessions. You do some, you look to do a proof of concept on a job. In some cases, you can even deploy that technology maybe in a smaller capacity to help them get out and scale. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's a thing I really admire and respect about corporations, and what makes me excited. My current capacity is to give innovative companies the ability to do that and get engaged, right? So that's a really unique thing that you can't, you struggle to get. I mean, you can go out to venture capital, angels, individuals, family and friends, but it's going to be hard to get those POCs, and that is really where both companies benefit. And then if it goes good, corporations typically will have a chance to make an investment, a strategic investment, or an acquisition down the road, a strategic acquisition, and that's where you get your corporate development, your M&A team, and things can go really well from there. And I've seen it, time and again work to the benefit of for us and other companies. So it's a very exciting process, and I think it's continued to get better over time with technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many moving parts, as you just mentioned. So, but ultimately, when a company like yours wants to make revolutionary decision that's really going to alter the landscape within that company or whatnot, is it just the CEO has got to be swayed, like for instance in your company, to just say, okay, we're implementing this, or is there a really intricate board process that's going on and lots of hats have to sort of agree unanimously or whatnot to and what is that landscape or environment within your organization that you see, and what are some pros and cons to either?
Yeah, typically though, the way it's structured is companies will have different businesses, different lines of business, and when it comes to quarterly earnings or reporting calls, it's a aggregation of all those different businesses to see how overall how the business is performing, and you see company stocks rise and fall based on how lines of business are performing. Whether that's when it comes to Apple, how is their services business, or when you look to that streaming business or production, and for us it's no different. When we break down into verticals, we've got a couple different businesses. We play in the data center space. We look at buildings, automation, energy management, all of that stuff, right? So typically, it's always usually the innovation team plays a very big role, right? And the M&A team always in most companies are engaged together and working, and they work closely with the line of business that potential technology or company is going to affect or will roll into. Sometimes it will roll across the business, but you'll usually have that line of business involved up to an executive level, right? There's typically sponsorship, right? There's somebody within the company that's going to provide executive sponsorship and oversight to make sure things go smoothly. And then it gets, and then when things do move forward, folks get assigned from different parts of the business to make sure it's a smooth integration. It's an integration process because that's absolutely critical. If you don't integrate correctly, you put a lot of things, all that hard work, time, and capital at risk. So that's kind of how it goes down today. And then usually there's an overarching part of the organization that gets involved. Typically, if there's software involved and services, that's when you'll have to be very strategic and look inward, and both a mix of inward and outward to make sure that you have a good seamless integration practice.
Yeah, amazing. So, hey, thanks so much. I think this was phenomenal. We've covered a lot of topics, a lot for people to digest and so forth. So,
I think
points you want to?
No, I think this is good. I think, Jaret, we've got a good building block to go off of, because what people want to hear today, they want to know what it takes to build a business, but they also want to hear about how do you work best with corporates, right? How do you partner together? How do you even engage? And if you want to start in the corporate role and innovate and build a career there, and then maybe go into a startup or that type of thing, what does it take? And I think this is, us getting out here openly talking about these key elements, being brazen about it, being forthcoming, and having the right guests, as you've heard, throughout our program today. That's what it's all about. And I'm excited to continue to explore this and bring critical issues to the forefront, and hopefully address many of the key issues and questions that our listeners have. So it's a privilege. Thank you so much for making the time and getting this off the ground. And I guess now a word from our sponsors.
Thanks for tuning in to Made for the Moment, featuring Jason Dodier and Jaret Grossman. Until next time.